I think we will no longer rely on any kind of imports of Russian energy sources. Simply because we saw how unreliable these supplies can be. It will be painful. It will mean higher energy prices for the next 2-3 years, but I'm sure we will make it. And it's going to be an acceleration of energy efficiency, diversification of sources, but it's also going to clear up a lot of dependency that we had, which also had political consequences. So I think all in all, we will all be strengthened by this decoupling from Russian energy supplies. There should be two types of measures. So first of all, we need to deal with the current year plus the next year, and then we need to figure out what to do in the medium term. I think it's critical for the EU to go with on with strengthening sanctions. I think the capping of Russian oil prices will be very important. Russia doesn't have an alternative market for the gas that it used to sell to Europe, so it's going to hurt them much more than us. And I think what we saw with the gas prices this year was a result not so much of the lack of gas. It was much more a sense of panic of what could happen if the Russians stopped gas supplies. I think right now we are starting to realize that it's not going to be a tragedy. All the market players realize that the situation is not so critical. We are much better prepared. So these two measures are very important in the short run to cap the revenues that Russia makes from its sales of energy. We need to then deal with decoupling from nuclear energy supplies, because a lot of our nuclear capacity is either supplied with Russian fuel, or there are deals with Russian companies, and those need to be tackled as well. In the long run, I think what this would mean would be an acceleration of renewables. And then we'll need to think a little bit how to make sure that we don't replace one dependency with another. Because, of course, now there's a big discussion at EU level. How do we make sure that once we move to renewable energy, we don't get excessively dependent on Chinese supplies of equipment and raw materials? So these are going to be very difficult discussions. Also on energy efficiency, we need to do much more. So far, a lot of the industrial consumption in Europe comes from companies which have developed over a long period of time of cheap supplies from Russia. And we will need to make some difficult choices there. At the same time, we need to take into account the fact that before the war, we had a different type of crisis in which we realized that certain supplies we need to make closer to home because there might be events which disrupt logistic chains and transport. So we need to make a difficult choice of how much industry we need still in Europe at very expensive energy costs, but maybe there will be need for more state support, I don't know, for medicines, for fertilizers, for steel. It's going to be a tough discussion over the next 2-3 years with a lot of lobby, probably. We need to put much more emphasis on solidarity. And, this year, we showed the benefits of solidarity, but we also showed how badly it is to panic, and each of the countries is doing its own things, which may lead to a lot of chaos on the market. So, for example, you see that Germany can afford to subsidize the entire consumption, while other countries introduce all sorts of distortions in the market. So we need to make sure that the measures that we take in the short run don't endanger the transition, the development of the energy market in the long run. So on this, we need to come up with a much more consistent policy at EU level and much more coordination. I think we would need to have a joint procurement for certain energy supplies from outside Europe. Because it's much more difficult to negotiate as an individual buyer a gas supply once you are in a global competition, for example, for LNG, than it is for the entire union to act as a single buyer. So this option needs to be explored. And yes, we need to make sure that we don't do inconsistent things. Let's put it this way. First of all, both Moldova and Ukraine are part of the common energy market of the European Union, let's put it this way. I think we, Romania, have the possibility to supply energy, meaning both gas and electricity. The major challenge, I think, for Moldova is not necessarily the lack of energy, but the affordability of this energy, because energy supplies from Europe are in general, or particularly the electricity, is much more expensive, including on the Romanian market. So here we need to figure out one way in which we can either supply energy at a lower price, or we can provide the sort of financial support for the government to support the end consumers. I think this would be the easiest way to do it, to give financial support for the government to compensate the consumers which cannot afford the high energy prices that will be in the next. Plus also, this is something that we need to do also in our countries, to put as much effort as possible into energy efficiency. So the bill of an individual consumer is made of the price of the energy and of the quantity of energy. We need to make sure that all the houses are insulated and they don't lose energy. And for that, I think it's also very important support improving the quality of living.